Hello, everyone. My name is Ywca, and my capstone project is titled Assessing the Effectiveness of YWCA Interim House in Detroit, Michigan. This project focuses on Detroit's only dedicated domestic and sexual violence shelter and how it supports survivors through trauma-informed services while also facing serious systematic barriers. Today I'm going to walk through why this work matters and how I approached my analysis and what improvements can help the shelter moving forward. Domestic violence is a public health crisis in Detroit, with rates of intimate partner violence and sexual assault among the highest in Michigan. Many survivors, especially women of color, LGBTQ individuals, and people with disabilities, face overlapping challenges like poverty, homelessness, and trauma. The YWCA Interim House plays a critical role by offering not just emergency shelter, but also counseling, legal aid, case management, and financial support. However, the demand for these services is extreme. It exceeds the capacity that the house is able to hold. And staffing, obviously, it puts a pressure on staff, and then it causes a very high turnover rate at these facilities. My project aims to assess how well YWCA Interim House is meeting these needs and to offer data-informed, community-centered recommendations for improvement. My assessment combined several components. First, I conducted a very deep, comprehensive literature review of scholarly sources and examined trauma-informed care, shelter service models, crisis response, and best practices in nonprofit management. Second, I analyzed public documents and performance reports from YWCA Interim House itself. Like I looked at budget, staffing, capacity, and program descriptions. And then third, I plan to collect preliminary qualitative insights by conducting research on staff members that work there, the organization itself. Even though the data was very limited, this step helped ground my analysis in the lived experiences of these practitioners. I also have experience with these interim houses just because a few years ago I used to volunteer there. So I did see firsthand the amount of people that enter these facilities. There was a point where I sat in a room with over 60 women of color that had to leave the trauma that they were going through at their homes from their spouse or whoever it may be. The literature helped me identify 7 best practices that highly effective shelters use. The first one being integrated service delivery. That's like the non-stop shop model, and it improves coordination and survivor outcomes. Second, trauma-informed organizational culture, like staff training, the policies, and the healing-centered environments. Third, strategic community partnerships, like they do have a contract with the Detroit Medical Center, law enforcement, and then obviously other housing agencies. 4, culturally responsive programming. 5, staff wellness and retention. So like the burnout of the staff, like they are overwhelmed. And again, like I mentioned, the turnover rate is very high. 6, outcome-focused data systems, so tracking long-term success, not just the short-term outcomes. And then 7 is financial diversification, like shelters with stable, diverse funding, weather crisis, and so on. YWCA Interim House has several notable strengths. It does provide a comprehensive trauma-informed service model. Like, for example, there's counseling, attorneys, legal aid, childcare, and also economic improvement services. The shelters partners with the law enforcement through the Detroit Sexual Assault Kit program, a project that they currently have in Detroit. And with the legal aid and housing agencies is obviously a plus for the shelter. During COVID-19, the shelter did demonstrate resilience, quickly adapting services and safety protocols. Its focus on financial empowerment addresses one of the biggest reasons survivors return to abusive situations, which is very sad. And then these strengths do show that the shelter is mission driven and it aligns with many national best practices. Despite the strengths that the shelter has, the shelter also faces a few key challenges. First being severe capacity limitations. I would say about 62% of the callers are turned away. I mean, the housing in Detroit, very limited. The thing is, it's not just the interim house, it's many other shelters that have to turn away these women because of how many women are survivors. Workforce burnout with 42% turnover in salaries, 15% below market rate. Third is limited cultural inclusion. The LGBT community, very difficult. People who don't speak English, they're also very difficult, and they usually turn them away as well. 4, underdevelopment. Just because they turn them away, just because they don't have the resources to keep them, it's very minimal. And then moving on to 4, under developmental health integration. Only 40% of counselors are trauma certified. Number 5, minimal long-term tracking. Only 28% of survivors are followed up after they exit. So that's why long-term, we don't have that much data. 6, over-reliance on grants. 78% of the funding is from time-limited sources, leaving the shelter vulnerable. And then obviously, like I mentioned, it's very difficult to get these long-term information just because it's limited and they don't really follow up with these individuals. To address the gaps, I developed a very detailed, comprehensive set of recommendations in 5 different areas. First being program enhancements, developing in-house trauma-focused mental health clinics, maybe expand language access and create inclusive services for the LGBTQ community, or even disabled survivors as well. Number 2 being financial sustainability, diversify revenue through corporate partnerships and donor campaigns, build a 6-month reserve fund and professionalize grant operation. Number 3, community advocacy and policy. They could launch a domestic policy council with key public agencies. I mean, everything is knowledge is expanding. So being able to do this, especially for shelters, since this is a very, very sensitive topic to some people, I mean, there are different things that they're able to do to improve long term. 4, outcome monitoring, use logic models and client feedback to refine the programs. 5, operational improvements, improve staff retention, try to keep them, pay them better, fellowships, pensions, and so on. The recommendations, they don't just benefit the YWCA, they serve as a model for shelters across the state. I mean, they can learn from this YWCA home and then move on to improve their shelters as well. The capstone project allowed me to apply the principles of public administration and policy to a real-world, high-impact issue. It taught me how to connect trauma-informed service delivery, equity-centered leadership, and nonprofit sustainability in meaningful ways. Most of all, it reaffirmed my commitment to working in systems that center dignity, safety, and empowerment for all. Thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions that you could have on this topic. And again, thank you so much.